let us start with the second chapter of your third summative evaluation, The Selfish Giant by Oscar Wilde. Let us know something about Oscar Wilde. Oscar Fingal O'Flaherty Wills Wilde, born on 16th October 1854 and died on 30th November 1900, was an Irish poet and playwright. After writing in different forms throughout the 1880s, the early 1890s saw him become one of the most popular playwrights in London. He is best remembered for his epigram. Epigram is actually a kind of satire, drama, short story, criticism, journalism. Before I start the story The Selfish Giant, you must know about the theme of the story. Oscar Wilde wrote a simple and interesting story of divine intervention in nature, coexistence, and spreading love is the message of the story. The young boy was a messenger of God. He made the cruel giant repentant because he was not allowing his creations to blossom. When he broke the wall, happiness and beauty surrounded him in terms of children and spring season. Detailing and personification of hail, snow, north wind, and frost are presented well. I am going to explain this story in 5 parts. Today, I am going to start with the first part of the story of The Selfish Giant. Come to the first paragraph of the story. The story starts like this. Every afternoon, as they were coming from school, the children used to go and play in the giant's garden. What does this mean? The opening lines suggest that the children were fond of playing in the giant garden. So, after the end of their school, they were accustomed to come to the giant's garden and play there to their heart's content. It was a large, lovely garden with soft green grass. Here and there, over the grass stood beautiful flowers like stars. And there were 12 peach trees that in the springtime broke out into delicate blossoms of pink and pearl, and in the autumn bore rich fruits. The birds sat on the trees and sang so sweetly that the children used to stop their games in order to listen to them. How happy we are here, they cried to each other. What does this mean? It means that the giant's garden was a lovely garden with soft grass and beautiful flowers all over the garden. It had 12 peach trees that flourish with pink and pearl flowers in spring season, turn into rich fruits in the autumn. The children listened to the songs of various birds and thus lived in ecstasy. One day, the giant came back. He had been to visit his friend, the Cornish ogre, and had stayed with him for 7 years. After the 7 years were over, he had said all that he had to say, for his conversation was limited, and he determined to return to his own castle. Their enjoyment, that means the enjoyment of the children, had ended with the arrival of the giant, who was away for last 7 years to a friend's house. Again, come to the chapter. When he arrived, he saw the children playing in the garden. "What are you doing here?" he cried in a very gruff voice, and the children ran away. What does this mean? The giant was infuriated when he saw children playing in his garden. He started shouting at them in a very gruff voice and ordered them to get away. By his selfishness, a very high wall was built around his garden so that the children could not go inside to play. And what did the giant demand? The giant demanded, "See, my own garden is my own garden." See, there is a possession, right? "My own garden is my own garden," said the giant. "Anyone can understand that, and I will allow nobody to play in it but myself." So he built a high wall all round it and put up a notice board. What does this mean? The giant started shouting at the children. The children were scared and they ran away. Soon the giant built a high wall around the garden. He put up a notice board that trespassers will be prosecuted. That means those who would be trespassing. What does trespassing or trespassers mean? Trespassers means someone who enter the property without the authorities' permission. And what does the word prosecuted mean? Prosecuted means to take legal action. So, what does the notice board mean? The notice board means those who would enter the giant's garden without the authorities' permission, the giant would take legal action against them. What will you say about the giant after such a notice board was hung by him outside his garden? We are very sure it proves that he was a very selfish giant. The poor children had now nowhere to play. They tried to play on the road, but the road was very dusty and full of hard stones, and they did not like it. They used to wander round the high wall when their lessons were over and talk about the beautiful garden inside. How happy we were there, they said to each other. What does this part explains? It explains that the decision of the giant made the children very helpless, as they did not have a place to play, because if they play on the road, there was a lot of dust and stones. They were very sad and depressed. It can be made sure from the final statement that they made to one another, how happy we were there. Just look at the transition in the children's mind. Just before the wall was built, they used to say to each other that how happy we are here, and after the wall was built, they said to one another that how happy we were there. So, this is the transition of mind that was clearly noticed after the wall was built by the giant round his garden. Now, let us analyze the inner meaning of the story. The inner meaning of the story is very interesting. It is actually written in Christian allegory, where the giant's garden is analogous to the biblical Garden of Eden, the idyllic paradise where humans first came into being. The creation myth in the book of Genesis describes Adam and Eve, the first humans, as innocent and naive, lacking all knowledge of good and evil. Many Christian writers see parallels between childhood, a time when such moral distinctions as good or evil are hazy, and the state of humanity in Eden before their fall. Oscar Wilde clearly follows in this literary tradition, placing the innocent children in a garden setting in which they are about to be expelled. This moment establishes the giant's selfishness as his defining characteristic, as well as the source of the story's conflict. The wall he raises is a symbol of the emotional barrier he maintains between himself and the children, which prevents him from forming any kind of relationship with them. The sign, meanwhile, speaks to how unreasonable his selfishness is. Only a truly cynical person would take legal action against children. Continuing the implicit comparison to the Garden of Eden, here Wilde shows the harsh world outside the garden, where the earth is hard and unyielding. Crucially, however, the children do not deserve this hardship. It is the giant's sin which expelled them from their paradise. So here comes the end of the first part of the story, The Selfish Giant.